Happy Tuesday, everybody. Happy Tuesday, everybody. So, hope everybody had a good week. And see, we got a couple people already on tonight. Awesome. Hopefully everything is, everybody's week went well. And every time I turn this software on, I have to reset the mics every time. So it's crazy. I'm gonna have to go to a different service, I think. But anyway, Mike's on. Happy Tuesday, Mike. So looks like it just started buffering. I don't know why I did that. Yeah, so it just looks like it buffered. So I got a whole nother problem I got to start working on. It's not, we're not having a good time here already. Let me see what the heck is going on. Alright, so I don't know, it keeps buffering, so hopefully we don't have to keep doing this all night. That's strange. We haven't had that issue before, so a whole new issue. Awesome. So anyway, Steve Murphy, happy Tuesday. I've been watching the videos on Leo Studebaker. Any chance you can talk about the oiling system and sourcing the valve train parts? Absolutely. And Turbojexer is on. How you doing, guys? So to answer Steve's question on the Chris Schultz is on. Hey, man. So on Leo's car, we're running a dry sump. So I don't know if you were able to see in the engine assembly video, but I'm sorry, I'm turning off things in front of my face here. It's a stock Trailblazer oil pan. It's been cut down. And it has three inputs, three pickups in it, and that goes to the dry sump pump, and that actually goes to just like any other dry sump system. It goes to the tank, and then the pump pulls out of the tank and pushes it into the block right above where the oil filter would normally sit. So the engine itself is oiled just like it normally would be, minus the oil pump and the filter. Now we are running some restrictors at the head gasket surface because we don't need that much oil going into the top of the motor, since it doesn't have EVT and it doesn't have hydraulic lifters, hydraulic tappets. So the oil is restricted back there to keep as much in the pan as possible. As far as valve train parts, the most of the parts are Jessel. The tappets are out of Ecotech, and I believe the rockers are out of Ecotech. They're all pretty much use a lot of the same components there. The retainers and springs, I don't have any information on what brand they were, but basically they're the same thing that you would see in a pro stock motorcycle or in a Honda or anything like that. So the spring information is really going to be determined by what camshaft you run. So the spring information you're really going to have to get once you figure out a camshaft. Then you'll get the specs from what the cams are calling for as far as open and closed seat pressure and for coil bind. And then you can figure out the springs from there. Most valve spring companies list the springs by the outside diameter, inside diameter, height, and coil bind, and pressure at certain installed heights. So there's really not wouldn't be a common part number that you would go to, but that's basically what that is. So Steve says he's heard people talk about using a scavenge in the head. Restrictors make sense. Yeah, we always try to do that in any drag engine. We put restrictors to the top of the engine. You just don't need all that oil up there, and that way you don't have to run a scavenge. Because I think we've got a 3-stage oil pump on his car. So if you had to run a scavenge, then you'd have to put a whole nother stage on the pump. So it's just, more stuff to turn. So this is more than sufficient, and that's the way we've been doing them for a long time. Ryan's on. Professor Landis. That's pretty good, man. So that's the thing with that. Hopefully answers your questions on that, Steve. We are trying to get the motor in the car. Unfortunately, we've had issues with Pro Torque. The torque converter has a screw-on pilot hub on the front of the converter, and this one did not. The one they shipped did not reach the back of the crank, and we've been going back and forth with phone tag and stuff for almost 2.5 weeks now. But I did get confirmation tonight from UPS. I've got a package coming for tomorrow, so hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get that engine in the car, because I am running out of time. October 15th is coming rapidly, and that motor has to be put in the car. We have to fire it up, break the rings in, make sure everything is, all the systems are good to go. And I would like to put it on a dyno and at least run it through the gears and make sure everybody's happy before we go to the track. So we'll see. I'll definitely, on the lives, we'll definitely keep everybody updated on what's going on with that. And that's it. We'll just try to keep it going. This week we got some stuff done on the Camaro. I got the exhaust system 99% done. And I've got the engine, all the Holley harness to the engine and trans wired. I did spend a couple days making the harnesses fit the car the way I like to have them fit. Unfortunately, I was really busy this week, and I thought I had caught some of it on film, and when I reviewed, there's nothing there. So I did not get that, but I do have some video of where I'm at with the car. We'll show that in a little bit. What else went on this week? Pretty much, we had some other little stuff in and out I had to do. I had to spend some time working on my wife's car. That took up some time. Not important stuff though. So, I have to give condolences. My stepsister, my stepmother passed away on Friday, I believe it was. So that was a bummer, but she wasn't in good health, and so she's probably in a much better place now, and she can hang with my dad. So, Sandra, if you're listening, our thoughts and prayers are with you. So I don't know. Chris is on. I know we had some issues, or we were talking about some stuff last week off air, and he found some needle bearings in his motor, ended up having to put a set of rocker arms in his LS Nova. So I hope he got that squared away, or at least in process. And we'll get that dry shafts measured for that thing and get you back on the road, man. That car is a lot of fun. So hopefully you're able to get some of that done. And next Monday, I've got 2 IHRA chassis certs I have to do. So I'm going to go do those. One's in Orlando, one's in Lake Wales. So I'm going to also go to Jacksonville and pick up the block and the heads for the burnout car. So we'll get some footage to show next week on that stuff. So making some progress, and hopefully after I take the Studebaker to Bradenton on the 15th, and then we'll leave it at Leo's when we're done. He can take possession of his hot rod. We will go get the burnout car, and we can get some video on that and see where we're at with that. While I'm thinking about the burnout car, if anybody that's watching the lives knows anybody in North Carolina in the NASCAR industry, I'd really like to get some more information on the chassis manufacturer of that car, because my end goal is to get that street legal. So I don't have to, but I really think it would be cool to have it documented, titled at the age when the car was actually built, rather than doing it as a 2023. No, Mike, I don't. Well, I mean, is the 4.8 iron block, actually you can bore that thing out to a 5.7. Usually you can bore them things out to the 3.902 or whatever, the 905. I've got one here I did on the channel. So but I actually right now I have 2 blocks in the shop now, so I don't currently need any more. And you know, that could be a future project for you. But I lost my train of thought. Sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, so NASCAR. So yeah, so looking into the paperwork to get the title, a VIN number put on the NASCAR. I got to fill out paperwork. It was a home built or cut shop built, whatever. But I don't want to claim that I built it or anything like that. So if I could get the original manufacturer of the chassis, I thought that'd be pretty cool to have on the title. So anyway, if anybody knows anybody, that'd be good. Chris says, good, broke a little supercharger belt, waiting on a new one. I'm intending to. Okay, so you had it running and you broke the super belt. That's a bummer. Those things I don't know if you run the green belt. If you do, you probably should get a couple of them. But they usually last a little bit of time, but not like a normal serpentine belt where you can get 70, 80,000 miles out of it. The supercharger definitely puts a lot of stress on those belts, so it won't last quite so long. But unfortunately, I'm a little unprepared tonight. I was trying to get a lot of stuff to put on the channel, and I didn't do it. I just wasn't able to get it all done in time, so I apologize for that. I'm glad to see there's a lot of people in the chat. That definitely helps out. We can, go from there. I guess the thing, I'll go ahead and tend to bring the dry shaft. Okay, to Saturday, cool. That's good. We'll measure that dry shaft and get you all set up on that. I guess I'll show this little video I made on the, it's very short, but we can talk about the exhaust and stuff on the Camaro. So I decided to get all the fender covers off to get a nice video of it. But as you can see, I've gotten the EFI harness pretty well hidden out of sight on this thing. It was a lot of cutting and splicing, not really splicing, but cutting and shortening of the harness to get the lengths proper, to get that all in. You can see there the Hydro Boost is done with the brake lines, and I've got the return line made to go back to the pump, and plug wires in. The coils are all wired now, and just got to start working on the AC and the heater lines and radiator lines. And there's the exhaust system. The driver's side still has to be welded together, but it's all hung up there, and you can see there's the ICE clamps and how good that works, because you can do sections of pipe and see where you're ending up, rather than doing one pipe and then having to figure out the angles right for the next one and stuff. But we put V-bands at the mufflers and the mid pipes to the X are all original. That came on the car, not original from the car, but that's what came on the car, and we reused that. I redid this section, so I put mid-length headers to get more ground clearance, and of course Joe wanted cutouts, so we made some cutout extensions there. I did all the cutouts in 3-inch, so you got some good flow there, and it's pretty much coming straight off the main pipes. So that all came out real good, and of course V-bands onto the headers. So I got the training lines in, the shifters in. I got a bunch. There's the dry shaft PST aluminum dry shaft in there. So making some progress on there. If you notice on the master cylinder, it's an adapter I built to pressure bleed the brake system, because I'm a one-man guy, so I can't pump and bleed brakes at the same time. So that's what that's all about. And Joe's original cap is still untouched. I made that off of a spare lid. But it's got Detroit speed wipers. See for a quick second there, makes it nice and clean. And then Holley mid-mount setup, which is really a clean setup for that. And the Holley valve covers that hide the coils. So I think it's going to look really nice when it's all done. Chris, this motor is a 525 horse GM crate. So it's they claim now it's a 535 in the paperwork. I don't know what they've changed to do that. And of course, it's got a Brian Tooley intake. The intake is on more for cosmetic looks than for performance. That manifold is really better suited for boosted applications because the runners are a little on the short side, so it'll knock a little bit of torque out of the engine, but not enough to make a difference. I mean, this car with 525 horsepower is going to be a ripping demon, and it's got a 4L75 trans, so it'll do real good. And we put a 354 gear, I believe, is what I put in the rear end of it, so it's going to scoot really well. And Joe will be able to play with his dumps and go into the, have the open header sound when he doesn't see any of the police in the area. So he should have a lot of fun with it. So that's kind of the progress there. Most of that exhaust system is all done now. I just have the driver's side tailpipe to finish up, and just to finish the welds at the EX pipe. But all that pipes are all fully welded, and that's all good. So that's the update that I photoed on the Camaro. I did put low car pedal assemblies in, and like I said, repaired the tunnel, put the automatic shifter in, and as I stated last week, I had to remake the ECU mounts behind the dash because the Dakota Digital ended up being a little bit bigger than I had anticipated, so it won't interfere. So everything had to be remounted. Chris has looped the fuel line in the front of the fuel rails. What I'm doing is I'm coming up with the way I do anything that's under 550, 600 horsepower is I use the factory line to the front. So where the factory line stops at the crossmember, I got a Y block, and two lines will go up and feed the left and the right fuel rail, and then there'll be a loop in the back, and that's where the pressure sensors in the back. So all the fuel will have flow coming from both directions. You could go in one side and cap the other side, but I don't like that a lot because now you've got places where air could sit continuously, and you'd have to be bled through the injectors, and that's no good. So I do it this way. It could possibly collect a little air pocket in the back, but there's no injectors back there, so it won't hurt anything. And of course, when it drains down and refills, it should eventually fill that up. Ryan says, "What do you think is a good? What do you think is good on the street?" I think 500, 600 is sweet spot. Absolutely, 500. I try to explain that to customers or friends all the time. Anything over 500 horsepower is really hard to use on the street. If you, like I said, so like on the Vet Hawk, when I build that should be almost 700 horsepower. But I also have a program written in the Holley Dominator to retard timing from front wheels versus rear wheel speed. So it works as traction control. So that makes it a lot more tamer. But obviously, if you want to make 1,200 horsepower and drive on the street, you can, but it's kind of a waste of time because it's going to be really hard to get any kind of traction or anything else. So I agree, Ryan. 500 to 600 is really the sweet spot. A car is super fast at that speed. Unfortunately, people like to throw numbers around, and people like to say, "Oh, I got 500 horsepower and this and that." But the truth of the matter is there's not that many cars that actually have 500 horsepower. You go to the dyno and you can see real quickly how much power people have. And I remember when I had my chassis dyno in my old shop, it was a good wake-up call for a lot of people. A lot of them didn't leave happy, unfortunately. I mean, they left happy the car was tuned well and everything else, but they just approximated that they were 650 horsepower because I got this motor and I did this part and this part and this part, and that should all equal to like 650 horsepower. And you try to explain to people it doesn't quite work that way, but you go on the dyno and it tells the truth. So but yeah, 500-600 horsepower is definitely the sweet spot on that. And I mean when I drove this Joe's Camaro before we pulled it apart, it had a 468 in it and Muncie 4-speed, and it wouldn't even break the tires loose. So there you go. There's this guy that sold the car. He's got this big block, thinking he's I gotta have 500 horsepower or whatever he thought it had. But I mean, when you got a stick shift car and you can't break the tires loose, you got a big problem. And I was telling Joe, I said, you're going to be shocked at how this car drives when it's done, because it's going to be night and day from that big block. Plus the fact we probably took 250 pounds out of the front of the car. So thanks, Chris and Steven, for saying beautiful work. I appreciate it. I try hard. I treat all the customers, and I say customers, they're really friends. I don't really have any customers. Everybody's car I work on, they're my buddy or friend or whatever. And I definitely try to treat the job as if it was my car. And I make the suggestions as such. I was talking to a gentleman today. It's going to be a future job with a Buick Grand National. And I was showing him the Holly Pro Dash, and he's like, he wasn't sure if he really wanted to spend the money for the dash, because he saw I put it down as an option. But when we got talking about it, I explained to him that it drives me crazy when I see cars with all these pod gauges on the pillar pod or pillar post. First of all, it blocks your line of sight. It's hard to get all the wiring and all that stuff up in the pod and get it fitted right. And the gauges are usually so small you can't see them anyway. Whereas you put the Pro Dash in the car, and now you can have different pages of gauges for different sensors you want to read. Fuel pressure, oil pressure, flex fuel, because most cars I go ahead and hook them up for flex fuel. And that way, you have all your information in front of you, and when somebody walks by the car, they don't see anything intrusive hanging out. Everything's in the dash where it belongs, and you have a full warning system. The Pro Dash you can set up warnings for every sensor in the ECU that you want to set a warning up for. So, especially on a boosted car, you definitely want to know if your AFRs are going, lean, or if your fuel pump isn't producing pressure. On a lot of these cars, that Grand National being one of them, it's going to be running a dual pump setup. And there's really no way with two pumps mounted in the gas tank to know if both of them are working, except for by fuel pressure and when you're in boost. So with the Pro Dash, I can set it up with a warning system, so if the fuel pressure ever drops 5 psi below its target, immediately there's a problem. You can get out of the gas and save the engine. So John's in. Hey, how you doing? Chris, will alarm go off? Yes, with the Pro Dash, the alarm is a light. You can set it up as lights, and you could output to a buzzer or something also, because it has a ton of inputs and outputs out of the dash also. So you can put your turn signals in the dash. You can put your high beam light in the dash. You can put, if you want to put a brake pressure switch, you can put it in the dash. Obviously your fuel gauge, you want that on the dash. And then anything that's in the EFI system can be put on the dash. And like I said, you can build. There's I think 7 or 8 pages of gauge setups that you can customize any way you want, or you can, if you're computer savvy, which I am not, but you could do it, or you can get people to do it. There's people on the internet that sell gauge faces that are a screen for the Pro Dash. So it's I believe it's a PDF file, and you just download it into the dash, and you can create your own custom dash. I've seen where they've made a screen face so it looked like the OEM Buick Grand National face. I've seen tons of them where a picture of their own car is on the screen. So you can kind of do all kinds of different things. And of course, it's just like a cell phone. So you just swipe on the glass screen, and you can change from screen to screen as you want to go. You can view data logs right on the screen. You can do tuning through the ECU. You don't need your laptop. You can just go in and make adjustments if you want. It's not as robust as using the laptop, but you can definitely make quick changes if you see a problem or you want to make a change. You can surely do that. And plus, with the USB connections, you can hook up a mouse and a keypad too. So you got lots of options there. So they work really good. I've got a 12-inch. I got the 12-inch dash going to go in the Vet Hawk, and I definitely am going to put all kinds of little tricks in that thing. I want that to be, my calling card for Holly fuel injection for my tuning and stuff. So we're definitely going to put all kinds of little tricks and gadgets and stuff on there, because I think on that car, probably not when I first get it done, but that car's getting 4-corner shock sensors. It's getting steering angle input. So when I do a data log, and of course it's already got G meter and satellite GPS. So when I do an autocross lap, I can go back and replay and see. You can see, we'll put a brake pressure input, so you'll see when you're on the brakes, how much you're on the brakes, turning input, exit out, turning output for exiting the corners, throttle position, wheel speed, mile per hour. And then of course shock sensors. So it'll be data crazy, probably way more data than you could use. But I want to, put everything that I can on there so that we can learn and get future information and I think you can definitely start laying laps over laps, because on the Holly data log you can put multiple runs on top of each other. You can see where you're slow and fast on the runs. So I think there's definitely some gains to having all that data. That's, they always say data is king, so we're going to go for the king method. But yeah, so all right, I guess that was open-ended question. Steve's right, depends on the car. Yes, yeah. If you had a drag car with 33 and a half or 34 and a half, 17 slicks on the back, and you have your suspension, your 4-link set up for maximum bite, yeah, you probably can get more power to the ground. Obviously, street racers are doing it all the time, but even still, just like I was mentioning with my car, they're using power management. They're just not putting 1,300 horsepower as soon as they smack the throttle. And as far as the Street Outlaw guys at the last big shootout race they had, they're on 10-inch tires, 10-inch slicks, and they were all on their Hemi Pro Charge cars, which make in excess of 3,500 horsepower. So, yes, you can. There's always those instances that you can get something like that down the road. But I was talking about the 500, and I think Ryan was also as a general consensus. So your average hot rod guy or average street car guy, for that matter, either first time in the sport, or maybe not even in the sport, just wants to go out and buy a Hellcat or something. If you don't have all those computer aided systems in the car, Anything over 500 is really a super handful to operate. But obviously, with the open-ended conversation, with the right car and with the right computer advancements, you can definitely do it. And that is prevalent in like the Corvettes and the Camaros and the Chargers and stuff. These new cars all have yaw and brake activation, traction activation. There is all kinds of things that most consumers have no idea what goes on in these cars. Anything newer than like 2014, 2010, depending on the model. Some cars were all the way back into the early 2000s, like Corvettes. They had yaw control way back then. But whenever you see a car that has a track on-off switch in it, those cars have built into the computer system, the PCM, because it's a powertrain management in a factory car. It's not an ECU. It's not an engine control. It's powertrain. And through CAN bus, the brake system, the transmission, engine, any other accessories or systems in the car, all that stuff is all communicating together in CAN bus. You usually have a high CAN bus and a low CAN bus. The high is all the important things, which would include airbags and obviously traction control, braking, ABS braking and stuff. And then they have low speed, which would be stereo functions and whatever, cruise control, stuff like that. But the new cars have crazy stuff. I know Mike has probably been to some classes being a GM tech. When these cars actually step out and are spinning the tires, the throttle, because you got electronic throttle, so you don't have a cable hooked to the pedal anymore, so you're not in control of the car. If you think you are, you're sadly mistaken. So you've got the computer playing with the throttle blade to control the car. When the car gets into a yaw position, it starts applying brakes even though you're not touching the brakes. How do you like that? I was dumbfounded when I went to a ABS class and was taught that, and that was 6 years ago. But yes, the power control module can apply brakes to help the car in a controlled, or to make it have a controlled skid rather than out of control skid. So Mike says he deals with that every day. Yeah, and then on top of it all your new cars, you have all your LiDAR, radar, motion detectors in the bumpers and in the quarters of the car, camera out the windshield of the car. I mean, they are trying to fix the person that doesn't know how to drive their car. Unfortunately, for us that enjoy the automotive industry, and we enjoy cruising and performance driving and stuff like that, all this stuff is nonsense for us. We're paying for stuff that we don't want in the car. We don't even want to use it. Luckily, a lot of this stuff you can turn off, but it's new cars are a whole new breed. I was driving a friend's car the other day. Had to put some tires on it for him. It was a Toyota Camry, and I mean, you get close to the road lines, whether the edge of the road or the center lanes. The steering wheel vibrates. It gives you a warning signal. I didn't try it, but we were shown in class years ago that with the cruise control, with the camera going out the windshield, when you're on cruise, if you come up on somebody, the computer automatically backs the cruise control down for you. And I've witnessed that in my daughter's Malibu, that if you're not paying attention and you're in not heavy traffic, but just there's traffic on the road, and you got the cruise set at 65, you look down about 2-3 minutes later and you're going 62, or if it's like 10 minutes later, it could be all the way down to 60 because somebody have pulled in front of you. The computer saw it as somebody needs an avoidance, so it slows the cruise control down. But of course, when that car leaves, it doesn't put you back to your old setting. It just stays where it's at. So that's kind of a crazy thing. Um, Mike says electric power steering will actually start to correct the steering itself for lane departure. Yes, and excuse me, I was doing a wheel alignment on a Impala drag car for my friends up at Pros Tuning in Riviera Beach, and after I got done the alignment, now this car's a drag car. It's got 88 millimeter turbo on a 427 LS, turbo 400 with lockup in it. I mean, it's a race car. It's still in the street body, and I didn't realize that they still had a lot of the computer systems working in the car. So I did the alignment, and when they picked up the car, they called me and said, "Hey, this steering wheel's crooked on it." And I'm like, "That's strange. I know I double checked to make sure the wheel was straight and that the wheels were lined up." I know, if anybody's done wheel alignments, you know that the machines are supposed to make the wheel straight, but they never do. You still have to visually or road test them to make sure the wheel's straight. But I did all my due diligence on that car, and the what it ended up being was they still had the lane departure feature still connected. So being I did not reset the steering wheel for straight ahead, the power steering was actually inducing a pull because the computer was saying, "Hey, the steering wheel's not straight and we're supposed to be going straight." And so they went in and performed the recal on that, and that fixed it. But there again, I mean, when you're doing a wheel alignment, now you have to reprogram the computer so all these systems work right. It's crazy the amount of Big Brother that's in these new cars. I, for one, don't want any new cars. My newest car is an '02, and I don't think I'd ever get anything much newer than that, because I don't need that stuff. I like the thrill of driving. So anyway, Ryan says, depending on you and your car, my car is so basic, anything over 500 might be a problem. If you're talking about your Vega project, I think you'll be fine because you've got you're putting a performance suspension in there. If I remember correctly from my seeing the pictures and stuff, you're running a 3-link, basically a trailing arm setup in that. And if you do the math on the car, obviously it's not completed yet, so it's kind of hard to do now. But if you do your anti-squat math on it with the position of the trailing arm center pivot, it'll be pretty far forward and pretty low compared to the CG of the car, which means the car will squat on acceleration, which will drive the tires, the weight onto the back tires and help aid in traction. I think you'll find you shouldn't have too much traction problem. Plus, I'm sure you're going to put adjustable shocks on there so you can control compression and rebound, which that'll also aid in traction. So, and of course, I'm sure you're building that car. You're a bright guy. You'll be able to control throttle, control traction with your foot also. So, but yes, you're right. There's a lot of nuances that go into that story about how much power is usable and not usable, and it's definitely a case by case subject. Not only vehicle case by case, but operator case by case. So, but like I said, I always use the 500-600 horsepower range for, as you would say, John Q. Public. So that pretty much covers most people. Obviously, I mean, there's people that crash a Honda Civic. So, anything is possible, I guess. So, Mike says his wife's got a 16, and yeah, you have the 95 and an 04. Okay, yeah, and your 04, your 04, if that's a Silverado, that may have a steering angle meter in there. I don't know if it's definitely not lane departure or anything, but your wife's is 2016. I'm sure it's got lane departure in it. John says, I have a Gen 6 XL. I'm having drivability problems. It is surging at idle. Oh boy, John. So here's I've tuned a lot of Gen 6 stuff, and one of the things about the Gen 6 system was and is it operates off of a narrowband O2 sensor. And for anybody who doesn't know, O2 sensor versus wideband, an O2 sensor is a 0 to 1 volt, or it could be 0 to 1.5 volt, but it's a sine wave, so sideways sine wave. So anything rich is going to show below the threshold. 0 to 1 would be 500. So like 450 and lower, excuse me, I got that wrong. At 450 and lower, it's going to be lean, but it doesn't know how lean. And anything, say, 550, 600 and higher number is going to be rich, but it doesn't know how rich. So to make the Gen 6 run decently, you pretty much have to target a rich signal all the time. So typically, a surge at idle is the motor is lean, especially if you have mechanical timing, so you don't have the timing bouncing around. If you have computer controlled timing, you can fix some of that with idle spark correction, and that is a table that will, they might call it idle spark in the Gen 6, but what that is when the RPM goes up or down from the target, it adds or subtracts timing and tries to balance the engine with timing. All your new cars do that. So that can help. But typically, what I would do on the Gen 6 is I would target the engine to idle at about 13.8 to 13.9. It's kind of rich, but on that system, those are the nuances that are kind of out of its control. So you kind of have to do that. It's on a Super Ram, yeah. That was a popular kit. The John Meany and worked a lot with Lingenfelter. Lingenfelter is the one that designed most of those intake manifolds for Excel. So the Super Ram, on a small block, that's the big box with the short runners, and the lower looks like a regular tune port manifold, I believe. That was a really good manifold for up to like 370, 380 cubic inch. I've had them on some bigger engines, and it again becomes a little small. But it's a good system. If you wanted to update something a little, you got better drivability. I mean, if you could find a used Gen 7 system, they're on eBay a lot. Or if you're on Facebook, there's a Facebook group for Excel DFI. People have them on there for sale pretty cheap all the time. Or obviously, if you wanted to step into the future, you put a Holly system on, which I've done quite a few of. And then you've got a wideband system, and a wideband sensor basically is a 0 to 5 volt, and every 10th of a volt or 100th of a volt is a different AFR. So the computer now can decipher an exact AFR. So you can lean the motor out a lot more. On a typical Holly system, I'll have the motor idling at 14.7. On light throttle cruise, I'll have the AFRs up into the 15.2, 15.3 area to try to squeeze a little fuel mileage out of it. And then of course, as soon as you get on the throttle, it goes into a different section of the map, and boom, right into your fueling. So like watt fueling would be 12.9, 13.0. So that's the benefits of having a system that reads a wideband. But the Gen 6, I mean, it was way ahead of its time, but you're also talking about an engine management system that was designed in 1985. So it's been around a minute. But if you you can't data log on that thing. If you ever wanted to send me a file, I definitely would look at it for you and see what it looks, see if I see anything that comes up with it. And I got a little sheet that I can send you that you can fill in all the information about distributor, injectors, all that kind of stuff, and I can take a peek at it and see what's going on. Mike says, is 04 Avalanche? Yes, it does. And drive-by-wire, yeah, isn't that great? But, drive-by-wire is not the end of the world. It's just not the best thing. John says it's Edelbrock lower, Excel upper, and runners, yeah, 385 cubic inch. That's a good manifold for that motor. Going back, a lot of people might not know, but the original TPI manifold that came on the Camaros and Corvettes, John Lingenfelter actually designed that for GM. And as I was told by the guys at Excel, he was hired, they wanted a super fuel economy engine to try to beat the CAFE regulations. So they gave John a 262 small block, and he designed that intake manifold, and I don't know, GM probably gave him the ECU portion of it. And I mean, he knocked out some huge mile per gallon numbers and made really nice torque. And as I was told the story, he told him, you could put it on your 305, but that's like the max limit. And what they do, they put them on 350s and put them in Corvettes and stuff. So obviously the OEs never listen. So being that he had already built the tune port for GM, that's where the Super Ram came from. He just cut the runners off at level and put that big plenum box on the top of it for larger cubic inch engines. And like I said, that one worked really well up into the 383 area, 385. I've put them on some 427s. It works fine, but you could do a ton ram setup with 2 4s on it and gain some more horsepower, because you do run into a certain point where you can't get enough air through those small runners. But it's a good system. And it's funny you brought up the Excel. So last week I got my buddy Eli Nahed from Excel. Well, he's not from Excel now, but back in the DFI days, he was the product manager for the DFI group. And so obviously we talked all the time, and we did some product development work together and stuff. I didn't do any development. I just did the R&D to see if it worked, see if end users could make it work. And so, yeah, over the years we had a lot of good things back and forth, and we've stayed friends all these years. So he happened to be in town, so we went and had lunch. So that was pretty cool. And then just by coincidence on LinkedIn, a gentleman, Steve, reached out to me, and he seen us talking, I think, on the Facebook page about the Excel DFI stuff. And so he reached out. He was a software programmer for Excel. He worked up in the Wixom, Michigan plant with John Meany, and he's going to hook us up with some software. He says he's going to do a calibration for me right now that we can alter the wideband settings in the Gen 7. So in the Gen 7, the way Excel set up for their wideband controls, which they had some awesome controls for back in the day. They were lab quality to the end user. Of course, the NTK sensors for the Excel system were $700, but you could get lab quality sensor in your EFI. And being that they didn't have self-learning, it was good to have that good a control. But anyway, the system as they had it had to be 0. The analog input would be 0 is 10, and 5 would be 20. And the reason they did that is because you could then use a voltmeter, and the voltmeter would become an AFR gauge. So if you're running at 14 volts, you had 14 AFR. So that was pretty cool. We could put a gauge in the dash of the car, and before anybody really had AFR meters, and you could read an actual AFR, and the ECU would too. But the downfall of that is now you can't buy those NTK sensors, the lab quality ones that Excel made, because they were all calibrated individually. So you can't just go to the store and buy one. It won't work right. But this gentleman, Steve, who reached out to me, says that he can program it to read any scale. So I gave him an AFR 500, AFM 500 scale, and he's going to go ahead and program that for me. And then maybe he'll do that stuff, or do that for people, or he'll hand the software off to us, or we'll see what happens. But it was great that he reached out to me, and great for everybody that's running Excel Gen 7 that we still have some factory people that worked at the factory that can actually help us. It's a shame that the testing equipment got ruined for that system, because we were able to repair those for a while, but now there's no tester, so we can't do that anymore. Let me check the things here. John says it makes about 400 horsepower AFR heads, forged bottom and roller, cam GM type injectors, HEI distributor. Cool. I mean, it should be a lot of fun. And your HEI distributor, is that the one with the C3 control, so it's got computer controlled timing, or is it the old school with a mechanical advance? John says, I lose throttle response and have to turn the car off and restart the car, and it comes back. I changed the throttle body, and it did one time so far. Why? Yes, drive-by-wire. So these are the issues of running factory ECUs in a performance car, unfortunately. So a lot of times what happens is on a drive-by-wire system, the manufacturers had to put in a lot of fail-safe issues, because the worst thing that happened, I don't know if everybody remembers the Toyota issues years ago, that the cars would just unexplainably accelerate to wide open throttle, and people are going 150 miles an hour, 130 mile an hour down the interstate and getting in accidents and stuff like that. I don't know if that was all Toyota's fault, or if that was just, people jumped on the bandwagon to lemon law their cars, or what it was. But Ford and GM and I believe Chrysler, those drive-by-wire systems usually will have 2 or 3 TPSs in them. So you've got one in the throttle body and 2 in the pedal, or 1 in the pedal and 2 in the throttle body, or however they do it. But what they're doing is, one TPS will be reading 0 to 5 volt, which would be 0 to 100%, and the other ones will be reading backwards. 5 is 0, and 0 is 100%. And what that was is for fail-safe. So if something happened in the wiring harness, and the computer saw the TPS is not matching where they should be, it puts the car in the fail-safe, your throttle goes dead. And that's why you have to pull over and reset your throttle. Now, one of the issues could be TPS. One of the other issues could be in your engine tune. So, like Chris, your car has been manipulated. Your PCM came from a Gen 5 Camaro, and when they put it into your Nova, somebody had to go in and eliminate the vehicle anti-theft devices and probably secondary O2s and catalytic converter efficiency codes and the stuff that we don't need in a performance car. And there are some settings for throttle position and for throttle volume. Probably I'm thinking that your Camaro was not supercharged, or the Camaro that your ECU came out of was not supercharged. So once they put a supercharger on there, now there's a whole bunch of other engine parameters that are going on that ECU may not have been completely tuned for. So this is why I personally always put Holley systems on, because the Holley systems are made for aftermarket cars. Now they do still monitor both TPSs as GM does, but they're only looking at the TPS settings and not at other engine controls to manage the throttle pedal. So for you, Chris, I still think if you can get into my buddies up at Pros Tuning and they go through your tune, Justin is aces on the HP tuners. So I think you would find that a lot of your issues that you've been having with your plugs going fuel rich and stuff like that, a lot of that stuff will correct itself. You just need to get the proper tuning, and obviously once you guys, you and your buddy put the flex fuel sensor in, he's going to need to write the tables for that also. But it'll be really good when you get all that stuff all sorted out. Mike says, yeah, GM usually has 2 TPSs in the throttle body and 2 to 3 sensors in the pedal. There you go. So, and if my understanding is that not only are they looking at the TPSs, and as I said, one will be going forward, one will be going backwards, and that's so if you have like a wiring issue and voltage is backfeeding or something, it would throw that stuff. That's why they're not all going in the same direction, voltage-wise. So it's just a fail-safe countermeasure. But also the GM computer is also looking at other issues in the engine management, and obviously they got yaw control and all those other things. So if all that stuff isn't turned off, you can pull your hair out with that. And the other thing is there's a throttle speed setting in the ECU too, of how fast the throttle opens in relationship to the TPS. Even the Holley has that. So just to kind of explain what that does is the electronic pedal is never 1-to-1 to the throttle like if you had a cable. It will go, but it's going to have a different. If you smack the pedal, you can smack the pedal in 1/100th or 1/1000th of a second from 0 to 100%. The electronic throttle will never open that quick. It'll open quicker, but it's not going to open as quick because there's electric servos and stuff that have to be activated and stuff like that. So, but I'd put a Holley system on a what they call a Palm Beach buggy. It's a swamp buggy, but it's got a deuce and a half axles in the front and back and straight rail frame. So it's rides real nice, real soft suspension and everything. But it had a LS2 in it with a drive-by-wire throttle body. And once we put and it used to go into failsafe all the time. So he didn't like the way it was running lean. And rather than having somebody go in and tune it, and I mean, obviously you can't put that on a dyno or anything, and you can't drive it up and down the street because it's got 60-inch tall tractor tires on it. We put a Holley system on it. And the guy told me, he goes, I got a really big problem. He says, we'll get, we do, it's a party barge. And they go out in the woods and get drunk and cruise, whatever. It's good for them. But he said if there was whoops in the road or, lines of bumps, rows of bumps, you'd start going over the bumps and your pedals, you start bouncing in the seat, and then your leg is bouncing, so then your foot is bouncing on the throttle, and the thing would start, surging, and get kind of out of control. Well, with the Holley system or the GM system, if you're tuning that, you can get in there and control the throttle. So I wrote a table that he had to be 50% throttle before the throttle blade would only go to 20%, and then after 50%. It went from 20 to 100%. That makes sense. So we had a slow curve, 0 to 50% TPS at the gas pedal, and then a straight spike from 50 to the 100%. So what that did was, if his foot was tapping on the gas pedal, it wasn't really changing the throttle blade at all because it was only at 0 to 20% anyway. But if he wanted to goose it, all you do is whack the throttle to the floor and you got 100% throttle. And that cured that issue. Now he can go over the bumps, he can jump around, bounce around in the seat, and the motor would still probably go up and down a little bit, but it would be very controllable and wouldn't throw anybody off the top of the buggy and stuff like that. So those are kind of the little lessons on my knowledge of drive-by-wire. And just to let you know, so far I've never built a car with drive-by-wire. I've worked on customers' cars that had it in the car, but I don't like it and I don't want anything to do with it. So I see Daniel came on. He said, yo back, man. Hope your Mustang is running good. We'll have to, I know you had a couple little issues you wanted to get, but right now with this rainy season, not a good time to drive the car down from Jupiter. So, but we'll get to that thing when you're ready. And obviously, getting here, some of the racing is starting to calm down, and hopefully we'll get you all dialed in 100%. And I seen John said he has old school distributors. So on his Gen 6, he is not controlling spark. It is a fuel system only. So that will, it'll take a little bit more work to get the surge out because we can't use the spark correction table, the idle spark table, to help mask the surging issue. But we can get in there and I don't know, John, if you have access to a laptop and to communications with your engine. If you wanted to try something on your own, please, first thing, and this is for anybody that's got any kind of fuel injection system, no matter whose it is, before you make any adjustments, save the file that's in the engine before you make any adjustments, and call it base or original or put today's date or whatever, and don't ever modify that file, but save your file. Then once that file is saved, then you can go into the ECU and make adjustments and save it to a different name, and that way you can always go back and forth. Anybody that's been working with any of my tuning, Daniel's one of them, he can attest that I always put dates. I put if we're working on multiple tunes one day or multiple adjustments, I'll start at 01 and work my way up, and it'll be today's date. And that way, it's very simple. I work on somebody's car, 2 years later, let's just say somebody zapped the battery or something, or the battery went dead or something. Somehow they got some damage to the ECU, to the corruption to the file. They can call me, and I go through all my files, and I'll see whatever the last date is, or if there's a multitude of the same date, it was the last date, the highest number, and I can give them a new file, and it's the file that we originally had back in when we did the tuning. So, saving files is one of the most important things you can do. Never try to make 2 or 3 adjustments in the same file. Always try to do one at a time. That way you can go back and forth. If it worked, it didn't work, you can go back and forth. If you make multiple adjustments, then it's kind of hard to go back, because when you go back, there's been multiple changes, so it may fix something, but it may not fix the other thing. So anyway, that was my soapbox on ECU files. So John, what I'm wanting to say for you is, if you can get into your vehicle and get into the Gen 6, one thing you could do is, when you see the cursor on your base fuel table, and you'll see where the cursor is floating around live while the engine's running, what I would first try is take a box around where the cursor is and make all those, that'd be 10 boxes in total, 1 in the center and 9 around it, make them all the same number, and then see how the engine idles. And then if it's rich or lean, raise all those numbers or lower those numbers the same until you get a smooth AFR and a smooth idle, and then you can play around with the numbers after that. But there's nothing wrong with having a block of numbers where the engine idles all the same. There's nothing wrong with that. So Daniel says, after the first cold front, sounds good to me. Definitely like to ride around in your convertible with cold air. Love it. Mike says, subject change. Have you seen the 2.4 turbo Silverado with the variable profile cams? I have not. I'm assuming that 2.4 is a version of the Ecotec. I don't know if that's a new engine totally, or if that's the same platform as the older Ecotec, or is that an Atlas platform? That could be maybe the 1.8 is Ecotec and the 2.4 is the Atlas program. I'm not sure. I don't keep up with those that much, but I have not seen that. The variable cams is, variable profile cams or variable cam timing is really useful in a OE situation, because now, obviously everybody noticed that in the last 10, 15 years, there's no EGRs on cars anymore. It's a new platform. Okay, so no, that's a completely different engine then. Variable profile cams. So are they running Fiat and Dodge were combined on one of their cars. I think it was a 4-cylinder also, that they actually had pneumatic lifters, and they would actually change the lifter position to make it an infinite variable cam. I think it was on the intake only. Atlas was 2.9. Okay, thank you, Stephen. Yes, you're right. So are they doing that with the? Do you know that, Mike? If they're doing it with an adjustable rocker arm, or are they doing it with an adjustable lifter? Because I mean, obviously the cam profile is going to be a cam profile, but and VVT is just changing the timing of the cam profile, not adjusting the profile. So they must be doing something with a pneumatic. Actually, you know, I take that back. I think the Dodge / Fiat engine wasn't a lifter. It was actually a pneumatic valve spring, and the cam have lobe sections that slide. Okay, so it's more like kind of like the old VTEC deal where there's two intake lobes and they have a hydraulic piston that locked the rocker arms together for the high profile and down for low profile. So I mean that system worked for years. The only thing that really worries me about a lot of these VVT and variable profile cams and hydraulic tappets and pneumatic valve springs is that the public is not aware of changing the oil. You have to change the oil. You have to have clean oil when you're using oil to be hydraulic controls in the engine. Because now you're talking about oil going through orifices so small that if you're not changing your oil, and I'm sure Mike can attest to this, the Ecotech variable valve timing solenoids on the intake. I mean, when I was working up at the fleet shop, I mean, we were changing those things like they were, I don't know what you'd want to call them like, but I mean, the car's got 50,000 miles and the solenoid's bad. The solenoid's not really bad, it's just it's got trash in it. And I mean, who wants to try to clean all the trash out and be liable for it? Just, you know, they don't want to change the oil, put a new solenoid in it. They're eating up rocker arm rollers like crazy. Yeah, chewing up the cams and rockers. Yep. And we had the same. You had the same issues with the when we were working at the fleet shop with the F450s. You know, these fleet companies are running these bucket trucks, and obviously they're running a hydraulic PTO off the engine, so the engine's running all day long. When those guys are sleeping in their trucks and they're running their buckets up and down and doing whatever they do during the course of the day. But guess what? The fleet management company that's paying the bills says we only want to change oil every 3,000 miles. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but you can't go by mileage on an engine that's running on an hour clock. And we would go into the odometer and the truck would have 100,000 miles, but the hour clock was equal to 350,000 miles. And they weren't taking that into consideration. We were changing tappets and rocker arms on those V10 Tritons like they're going out of style. I actually had them down. I got a wedge to put in the timing chain, and I could get the cam out and change the rock arms and the lifters in about an hour and a half. It was sweet. I loved doing it. Too bad I wasn't on commission. But anyway, the cams are mounted to the... Wow, I got to look that motor up, Mike. The cams are mounted to the valve cover. What the heck are they thinking on these things? And you know, and nobody wants to talk about oil changes on these things. I guarantee a lot of the wear that you guys are seeing can be related back to oil changes. So crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. Well, see, it's almost 8 o'clock, so I'm really happy everybody got on the chat tonight and made the night go by. I had no idea it was this late already, and I hope you guys are enjoying the discussions. Hopefully, I'll have a lot more video on the Camaro, and hopefully I'll have some video on Leo's 4200. When I do the engine install, I'm going to get some video on the intake before I assemble it on the engine, and the turbo pipe and the turbocharger and all those things, and obviously the engine in the car. Depending on where I get with that, I may even be able to hook up the Holly. Maybe I get a video on the Holly, and I can always plug my dash into it and maybe make a little video on the dash. So that'd be something something coming up. Mike says it started just as yeah, right. And they got rid of the diesels because they thought they had problems with those. Crazy. Yeah, so Mike left where we were working together when they started having the cam failures. Chris said, great episode, thanks. Steve, thanks for your Atlas 4200 advice. And again, Steve, like I just said, I'll have a bunch of video for the of the engine and the intake and exhaust, as long as the part that's coming red label tomorrow is the correct part, because this will be the second go around with Pro Torque on the pilot bushing for this torque converter. So hopefully it'll be good. Dan says, thanks for your efforts. I appreciate you checking in and thing. Ryan, great tonight. Thanks, George. Yep. Thanks, Ryan. Got to post some more pictures on Facebook on that Vega, man. That thing is looking awesome. I hope that once we get a couple of these little projects done, when I get the Camaro done, I asked Joe give me 30 days before he brings his next car in, that I can maybe get some work on the Vet Hawk. Steve says I have to build a Atlas intake exhaust parts this winter. They'd be awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely show them. Luckily, there's more and more stuff on Wiki, and people are sharing the programs for the intake and exhaust flanges. And I have to talk to my buddy Dave that has the 69 Chevelle, because I had his company scan that engine block girdle. So hopefully one day we can put that on the Wiki also. Yep, Mike, thanks, and have a good night. So, all right, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and call it there. I appreciate everybody input. It was a blast. I had a great time. Hopefully you guys got some stuff out of it, and we'll go from there. If John's still on, send me a file. My email and stuff is in the description, and it's also on the About Us on the homepage of the channel. And if anybody has been on but hasn't seen any of the videos on the channel, check them out. I got some pretty cool stuff. There's a couple different engine builds, some car builds, events, some drag racing. I try to put a little of everything on there. So with that, I think we'll call it a night. So see everybody next Tuesday. Peace.